Rain in West Harbor doesn't fall. It attacks. It slams against pavement like broken glass, smears neon lights across puddles like a watercolor gone mad, crawls under your clothes until it finds your bones. And it always comes with a scent oil, asphalt, and the metallic tang of trouble. I pulled Zuri close as we stepped out of Mama Lee's takeout shop, her tiny fingers warm in my palm. She was 7, bright as sunrise and stubborn as a storm. Her pink unicorn backpack bounced against my hip as I adjusted my grip, already calculating the next day's expenses in my head. $50 for gas, $20 for groceries, $24 left until Friday. Survival math every single week. "Mommy, my shoes are soaked," she complained, tugging at my arm. "I know, baby, just get to the car." "Okay, it's right across." And that's when I heard it. 2 men stood under the awning of a shuttered liquor store, half hidden by the rain and shadows. Their voices cut through the storm, not because they were loud, but because of the language. Korean. I'd heard enough of it during my hospital shifts to recognize its cadence, the clipped consonants, the lilting inflection, the way syllables stacked on top of each other like fast footsteps. But one word gutted me. Pogtan, Boktan, bomb. A second voice followed, clearer. "Urgent Kanihi?" "Put it in the car." I didn't understand everything, but I understood that. Something inside me froze, then cracked. I didn't look away, couldn't. The way one of the men darted a look over his shoulder, his eyes sharp and alert, told me they weren't just talking. They were watching, confirming, executing. And worse, he noticed me overhearing. His gaze locked on mine through the rain, a flash of recognition. People underestimate how expressive Korean eyes can be. His said, "You heard, and now you're a problem." My throat tightened. My heart kicked hard enough to bruise my ribs. I swallowed and forced myself to angle my body so the man couldn't see Zuri. She leaned into my side instinctively, sensing my shift in energy. Across the street sat a sleek, charcoal gray sedan with men in black suits arranged around it. Not bulky bouncers trained guards. Their posture said it all disciplined, alert, ready to kill or die on command. And in the center of them, with an umbrella held just slightly above his height, stood the man everyone in West Harbor whispered about but never named aloud. Jae-min Han. His presence was unreal, like someone carved a sculpture from storm clouds in tailored suits. Then told it to walk. Tall, sharp-featured, with cheekbones that could slice glass, and eyes like obsidian drowning in silver rainlight. Beautiful, dangerous, a contradiction wrapped in power. I shouldn't have known who he was, but everyone in West Harbor knew the shape of fear, and his silhouette was one of its defining lines. One guard reached for the car door handle, and without thinking, without planning, my body moved. "Zuri, stay here," I whispered and shoved her behind the corner of a delivery truck. She blinked at me, confused. "Mom." "Stay down and don't move before fear could stop me, before logic could drag me back." I sprinted across the street. My shoes slapped the pavement, splashing water that felt like needles against my skin. I didn't think about guns, or consequences, or the fact that Mafia bosses don't get warned they get targeted. I only thought of Zuri, of the patients I'd seen in the ER who arrived in pieces, of the people who died because someone stayed silent. My voice tore through the rain, raw and too loud. "Don't open that door. There's a bomb." Everything stopped. Sound. Movement. Breath. Then 6 men turned toward me in perfect, predatory synchronization. Guns didn't rise yet, but hands hovered near holsters, instinctive, lethal. My breath hitched, but my feet stayed rooted to the pavement. Rain plastered my curly hair to my forehead. My scrubs were soaked. I probably looked like a terrified, drenched nobody. A nobody who had just screamed at the most dangerous man in the city? Jae-min Han didn't speak. He didn't blink. He just looked at me. Really looked. And the weight of his gaze was a physical thing, heavy, analyzing, invasive. It slid under my skin, searching for truth, lies, weaknesses. Thunder rolled somewhere behind us, but it was nothing compared to the electricity locked between his eyes and mine. One of his guards stepped forward, jaw tight. "She's either insane or the Korean man who had noticed me earlier suddenly shouted across the street. Something fast, sharp, furious. I didn't catch all of it, but I heard one word again. Alacio. She heard. Han's gaze flickered. Barely, but enough. A decision forming. "What did you hear?" he asked. His voice was calm, too calm. Like he was trying not to spook a wild animal, or preparing to put it down. My mouth was dry. My pulse was a hammer. "I heard them," I said, nodding toward the two men under the awning. "They said bomb and put it in the car." I swear I'm not lying. Behind me, one of the Korean men cursed under his breath. Guilt or panic? Han's guard reached again for the door. Han didn't look away from me as he lifted one hand. A single gesture. And every man around him froze. Then, without breaking eye contact, he said quietly, "Check." Two of his guards moved in sync fast. Precise. Their flashlights disappeared under the sedan. My heart battered against my ribs. Then boss a ragged shout. "Device, there's..." I didn't hear the rest. Because the moment Han's head snapped toward his guard, I felt the world inhale sharply and explode. But that was the next chapter. In the heartbeat before everything went to hell, I saw Han turn toward me again, his eyes widening by a fraction, not fear, but warning. Then the shockwave hit. Rain had always been a familiar sound to Han Sharp. Steady, predictable. But nothing about the drenched woman screaming across the street was predictable. Jaemin Han had built an empire on one principle: control everything. Or burn everything that tries to control you. So when she shouted that warning, when her voice cracked the air like a glass blade, he should have ignored it, should have dismissed her as a hysterical civilian, pushed past her limits by the storm. But the moment her eyes locked on his wide, terrified, absolutely certain something in Han's mind stopped. Not fear, instinct, a pull somewhere under the ribs, quick and unwelcome. He didn't move, didn't blink, only raised one hand slightly enough to halt Minki from ripping her throat out for daring to interrupt. "Check the car," Han ordered, his voice low. Two guards dropped instantly, flashlights slicing through the rain. 1 second. 2. Han's heartbeat stayed slow and even, but his mind sharpened with cold. Lethal clarity. It always did. Right before violence cracked the night open. Then one of the guards inhaled sharply. "Chairman, the world detonated. Boom! White fire, red metal, screaming pressure. The sedan shattered into a rising column of flame that painted the storm in violent orange. The shockwave hit first, slamming into the street with the force of a jet engine. Han felt the air tear. Minki flew back, crashing into a lamppost. The ground lurched under Han's feet. And the woman, the one who had screamed the warning, was lifted and thrown as if the night itself had struck her. For a moment, everything blurred into fire and smoke. Then, piece by piece, reality snapped back. Fragments of burning metal rained down like hellish snowflakes. People on the street screamed. Alarms wailed. But Han didn't look at the wreckage. He looked at her. She was on her hands and knees, coughing from the smoke, her curls soaked and sticking to her face. Glass glittered in her hair like cruel stars. She tried foolishly, bravely to stand. Then he saw why. The little girl from before Tiny, in a pink raincoat with cartoon patches, was curled beside the delivery truck, shaking violently. The woman staggered toward her, ignoring the debris raining from the sky. A piece of burning metal spiraled toward her from above, jagged, screaming through the air. Han didn't think. He moved. Fast. Too fast for someone still bracing from an explosion. His hand shot out, grabbing her arm and yanking her into his chest as the metal shard slammed into the pavement where she had been. The impact reverberated through the ground. She froze against him, breathing hard, eyes wide. Even through the rain, through the smoke, he could see the exact moment she realized he'd saved her life. His grip eased, but he didn't step back. Her voice was a hoarse whisper, barely audible over the chaos. You could have died. Not tonight, Han replied calmly, though his pulse pounded a shade faster than normal. It wasn't the explosion. It was her. Her foolishness. Her courage. Her existence in the wrong place at the exact wrong time. He released her slowly, letting her weight settle back on her own unsteady legs. She immediately rushed to the little girl, pulling the child into her arms, checking her limbs, her face, her breath. Zuri, baby, look at me. Are you hurt? The child shook her head, but clung to her mother like she might drown in the rain. Han watched the scene longer than necessary, longer than wise. A mother shielding her child with her whole body. He had seen that look before once, a lifetime ago, on the night his own world burned. A sharp ache pushed through his sternum. Memory, unwanted, unbidden. Min-ki limped toward him, blood trickling from a cut above his brow. Chairman, the device was planted recently. Someone knew your route. We need to leave now. But Han wasn't listening, because a new sound cut through the storm, a soft whimper from Zuri, muffled by the woman's embrace. And something in that sound twisted inside him in a way that infuriated him. Emotion was a luxury, a weakness he had carved out of himself long ago. Yet here it was, sharp, immediate, disobeying him. And the woman. She stood on shaking legs, but she held her child with a strength far bigger than her body. Bruised, wet, trembling, and still fierce. Still thinking of someone besides herself. People like her didn't survive long in his world. People like her were the ones who shattered for good when the darkness pressed back. And she had just stepped into his darkness with both feet. Han exhaled once slow, controlled, and locked his gaze on Min-ki. Bring them, he ordered. Both. Min-ki blinked. Sir Han didn't repeat himself. Min-ki stiffened and signaled 2 other guards. The woman saw them approaching and pulled her daughter closer, eyes flashing with alarm. Don't hurt us, she said, voice raw but steady. Han stepped forward, the flames behind him bathing his face in a hellish glow. We are not here to harm you, he said, his tone even. But someone tried to harm me, and you were caught in the middle. The woman swallowed, rain dripping down her cheeks like tears. I only tried to help. Yes, Han said quietly, meeting her gaze with a strange heaviness. You did. Another piece of twisted metal groaned nearby, threatening to collapse from the ruined vehicle. The storm carried the acrid smell of burning rubber and gasoline. Sirens wailed in the distance. Police, fire trucks. Too close for comfort. Han looked at Min-ki again. Move. The guards moved instantly, guiding the woman and her daughter toward the waiting SUV at the curb. She flinched when Min-ki approached, but Han stepped between them, his voice slicing the tension. Carefully. Min-ki? She is not to be mishandled. Min-ki nodded stiffly. The woman, still holding Zuri, glanced back at Han. For a moment, their eyes met again, lightning crossing an already electrified sky. She looked terrified. But beneath that terror was something else resolve. Most people fell apart after witnessing death. She didn't. She had run toward danger, not away. Why Han didn't like unsolved puzzles, especially ones wrapped in trembling courage and warm brown eyes. He stepped closer. What is your name, he asked. She hesitated just a heartbeat, then answered Tasha. Tasha Brown. Her voice cracked, but not from fear, from exhaustion. Shock. The burden of a choice no sane woman should have had to make in the middle of a storm. Han nodded once, as if sealing the information away like evidence. Get in the vehicle, Miss Brown. Your daughter, too. She hesitated. Where are you taking us away from here? That's not an answer. It is the only one you will get until we are out of danger. Her jaw tightened. Not submissive, not obedient, smart. Han almost felt something like respect. A second explosion rocked what remained of the sedan, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The woman instinctively crouched over her daughter again. Han's chest constricted before he even realized he was moving. He placed a hand on her shoulder, steady, firm. "It's over," he said. But his tone carried an undercurrent even he didn't expect. Something close to reassurance. The woman's breath trembled. She didn't look up, just nodded once. Zuri peeked at him with wide, fearful eyes. Han's throat tightened unexpectedly. Children should never fear men like him. Children should never be near men like him. Yet here they were, as his guards ushered the pair into the armored SUV. Han turned back to the burning wreckage, the destroyed car, the smoking asphalt, the mangled frame that should have been his coffin. Someone wanted him dead. Someone bold. Someone close enough to know his route. Someone confident enough to risk burning the city around him. Han's pulse finally ticked faster, not from fear, but from the promise of retribution. But above the fire, above the fury, something else replayed in his mind. The sound of her voice through the rain, her scream, her courage, her body slamming into him when she tried to push him away from danger. He replayed the last image he'd seen of her before the explosion swallowed everything. A drenched, trembling woman with fire behind her, and a child before her, and a will that refused to break. Han stepped into the SUV beside her and shut the door. "Drive," he said. His voice was steady, but something inside him was not. Because even as the vehicle sped away from the inferno, he knew one thing. This night had not just changed his fate, it had changed theirs. The VIP room of the hidden bar was designed for silence, soundproof walls, dim amber lighting, a single leather sofa, and a marble table that reflected the glint of weapons, too clean to be legal. But tonight, the air wasn't silent. It was vibrating. With smoke, with tension, with the aftershock of a blast that shouldn't have missed its mark. Han stood near the window arms behind his back, posture rigid, eyes colder than the storm still raging outside. Rain streaked down the glass, each drop illuminated by the neon signs from the alley below. Across the room, Tasha Brown sat curled into the corner of the sofa, soaked scrubs clinging to her body, curls heavy with water, chest rising and falling with short, uneven breaths. She held her daughter tight, Zuri's small face pressed against her shoulder. But what struck Han wasn't their fear. It was their defiance. Even now pale, shaking, smeared with soot, Tasha kept her chin lifted. She looked at him the way no one ever did, as if she feared him, but refused to be ruled by him. Min-Ki paced like a caged animal in front of her, a blood-stained bandage above his brow. His rage tightened the room like a noose. "Chairman," Min-Ki said, turning sharply. This woman was at the exact place of the bombing. She screamed before it detonated. That scream saved your life." Han cut in, and it might have been part of the plan. Min-Ki snapped back. She could be bait, a distraction. Or worse, Min-Ki's gaze drifted to Zuri, whose small hand clutched her mother's jacket sleeve. He stepped closer. Too close. Zuri whimpered and hid her face deeper in Tasha's chest. That was all Han needed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move fast. He simply turned his head slightly enough for Min-Ki to see the warning in his eyes. "Step back," Han said. A razor-thin order, soft but lethal. Min-Ki froze, then obeyed 2 steps back, jaw clenched. Han rarely intervened for anyone. He had made exceptions only twice in his life. Once, 12 years ago for a girl who never made it past the age of 10. And now, for a drenched stranger with fire in her eyes and a terrified child that shouldn't have been anywhere near men like him. Han exhaled carefully, forcing old memories back into the grave where they belonged. He couldn't look at Zuri for long. Children always hit him where his armor was thinnest. He turned fully toward Tasha. "I need you to tell me exactly what you heard," he said. His tone was calm intentionally. She was trembling enough for both of them. Tasha swallowed, tightening her hold on her daughter. "I already told you," she said hoarsely. "Korean? 2 men? They said the word for bomb and put it in the car. That's why I ran." Her voice cracked on the last word. Han stepped closer, slow enough not to startle the child. Zuri peeked at him, then round, frightened eyes shining with leftover tears. Han felt a sharp, unwelcome ache in his chest. Elena had looked at him like that too, the night before the explosion took her. A memory sliced through him, her small hand holding his wrist, asking if he'd be home for dinner the next day, if he'd watch her school presentation, if he'd sit in the front row so she could find him in the crowd. He hadn't been home at all. None of them had. Han's jaw tightened. "Bring the interpreter," he said immediately. Min-ki hesitated. "Chairman? Now?" The room obeyed. Within minutes, David Kang, Han's quiet, sharp-eyed interpreter, entered the room still wearing his coat. He bowed quickly and approached. Han didn't sit. He never sat when interrogating. "Tasha," he said, voice steady. "Repeat exactly what you heard." Slowly, her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. "Boktan?" she said. "And then cha in neo iyo?" The tone was urgent, like they were confirming a job. David nodded thoughtfully. "That pronunciation is bad. Very bad," he added quickly, glancing at Han. "No spy would say it like that. And the phrasing is exactly what someone would say while confirming device placement." Min-ki scowled. "That proves nothing." David shook his head. "It proves she understood just enough to know it was dangerous, and that she heard exactly what she claims." Silence fell. Heavy. Cold. Absolute. Han's eyes settled on Tasha again, studying her posture, her breathing, the shake in her hands as she stroked her daughter's back. No deceit, no calculated trembling, no rehearsed story, just truth raw and shaking. He didn't know why, but the truth in her unsettled him. Han rarely questioned his instincts. They'd kept him alive. And right now, his instincts whispered back, "She's not part of the threat, but she's tied to it now." Min-ki broke the silence. "So what?" "We let her go, after she saw our faces, after she screamed in a street full of witnesses. After the bomb almost." His voice faltered when Han's eyes sliced toward him. Min-ki swallowed hard, but he didn't back down entirely. "She's a liability, Chairman, so is the child. We can't risk Han moved before the sentence finished." One step, close enough that Min-ki felt the air shift. "You will not complete that sentence," Han said softly. Soft, but the softness was a blade. Min-ki bowed his head immediately. Han turned away, his expression unreadable. His empire had been built on rules, not chaos, on boundaries, not savagery. And the first rule, the one etched in his bones since the night he lost Elena, was simple. No innocence, no children, no collateral. Tasha didn't know that rule, but she had triggered it. Han dragged a slow breath in, steadying himself. "Tasha," he said at last, voice low. "You overheard something you should not have, something that almost killed you, and someone out there knows you heard it." Tasha stiffened, her hand curled around Zuri like a shield. What are you saying?" Han stepped closer, but not enough to frighten the girl. "I'm saying you are not safe. Your daughter is not safe. And until I find who planted that device, we're not staying here," Tasha cut in, her voice breaking but bold. Han blinked. Very few dared interrupt him. She swallowed hard, but continued. "I won't let my daughter be dragged into whatever this is. She didn't ask for..." "She didn't." Han agreed. "And neither did you." Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise. Maybe she hadn't expected agreement. Not from him. Han lowered his voice, not gentle, but controlled. "Miss Brown, someone planned to kill me tonight. And you, by saving me, became part of the equation." Tasha's breath hitched. Han continued, "Whoever set the bomb will not ignore the fact that you shouted. They will assume you saw something, heard something more than you did. Her fingers tightened around her daughter. "So I'm a target now," she whispered. Han didn't sugarcoat. "Yes." The words sat heavy between them. Tasha shut her eyes for a second, not to erase fear, but to steady herself against it. When she opened them again, Han saw something he didn't expect. Resolve. "I don't care what happens to me," she said quietly. "But my daughter. She will be protected," Han said immediately. Tasha stared at him, searching his expression for deception. Han rarely felt the need to justify himself, but he felt something now, an urge to anchor his words with truth. "You have my word," he said, and he meant it. David watched them, silent but perceptive. Min-Ki exhaled sharply. "We can relocate them. Safe house, level 3, short term." Han shook his head. "No." Min-Ki frowned. "Chairman, they stay under my protection," Han said. "In my jurisdiction. No one touches them." Tasha blinked, shocked. Why, she whispered. Han held her gaze a moment too long. He thought of her sprinting through the rain, of her throwing her body over her child, of the way she'd looked at him moments before the explosion, terrified. Yes, but still refusing to look away. Why Han didn't allow himself the luxury of thinking the word, because he simply spoke the truth he could admit. "Because you saved my life," he said, voice quiet but unwavering. "And in my world, debts are never ignored." Tasha's lips parted, breath catching. Han didn't look away. "And until the person who planted that device is found," he added, stepping back slightly, a calculated move, "you are safer with me than anywhere else." Lightning cracked outside the window, illuminating the room in a pulse of white. Han turned to Min-Ki. "Prepare a secure transport." Min-Ki bowed. "Yes, Chairman." As the guards moved, Tasha tightened her hold on her daughter. Zuri looked at Han one last time. Her tiny voice trembled. "Are you going to hurt my mommy?" The room stilled. Han exhaled slowly. "No," he said softly. "Your mother saved me." Zuri stared at him, searching for any shadow of a lie. Han let her search. It was the only truth he'd spoken without calculation all night. And in the quiet that followed, he realized something unsettling. That truth was the most dangerous of them all. By the time the SUV dropped us at my apartment building, rain had soaked into places I didn't know water could reach. West Harbor's streets were quieter now, as if the entire neighborhood knew something monstrous had happened and was holding its breath. I held Zuri's hand tighter as we climbed the staircase. She was still trembling. Honestly, so was I. We reached my floor, and the familiar hallway should have comforted me. The peeling paint, the buzzing fluorescent light that flickered like it was possessed, the faint smell of burnt noodles drifting from Mrs. Alvarez's door. But something was wrong. The silence was too deep, too still, as if sound itself didn't dare enter. I stopped walking. There behind my front door was a sound no tenant in West Harbor ever ignored: footsteps. Slow, deliberate, inside my apartment. My breath locked in my throat. I pushed Zuri gently behind me, toward the railing. "Mommy," she whispered. "Shh," I mouthed, placing a finger to my lips. My heartbeat climbed into my ears, each thud like a scream. I reached for the baseball bat leaning beside my doorframe, the same old aluminum one I used last summer to try teaching Zuri to hit softballs. She'd been terrible at it, but right now, it felt like the only thing between us and death. Holding the bat with both hands, I steadied my breath and braced my body between my daughter and the door. 1 second, 2, I turned the key, and the door burst outward with a violent force. A man, tall, masked, bleeding from the nose, crashed onto the hallway floor at my feet. Arms wrenched behind his back and zip-tied so tight they cut into his skin. His breath was a wet, ragged rattle. Zuri screamed. I swung the bat instinctively, almost hitting him. "Move!" a cold voice commanded. I spun around, and there he was, Jae-min Han, framed in the dim hallway light like a nightmare carved from shadow and rain. Min-ki stood beside him, his expression murderous. Han stepped forward, towering, composed, terrifying in his calm. "He's not one of mine," Han said, as if discussing a spilled drink. "But he was inside your apartment." My fingers spasmed around the baseball bat. Inside my home, where Zuri sleeps, where her drawings fill the fridge, where her stuffed animals wait on the bed. A wave of nausea rolled through me. Zuri began to cry softly behind me, not loud, but a tight, trembling sound that cut through my ribs. Min-ki grabbed the intruder by the collar and yanked him upright. The man groaned, eyes rolling back. "What do we do with him?" Min-ki asked. Han didn't look at the man. He looked at me. And in his gaze, I saw something new, something colder than the storm outside recognition. The bomb hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning. "There isn't time," Han said. His voice was low, deadly calm. "We move. Now." "I'm not going anywhere." I snapped before fear could paralyze me. "This is my home." "It was your home," Han corrected. "It is now your target." "No," I shook my head. "You don't get to—" The intruder coughed violently, spitting blood on the floor. Min-ki jerked his head toward Han. He had her address written on his hand. Min-ki said quietly, "The kid's name, too." My stomach dropped. Someone had marked Zuri. The world tilted, not physically, emotionally, like the ground I trusted wasn't ground anymore. Zuri pressed her face into my back, and I felt her small fingers dig into my shirt. I choked on a breath. I didn't look at Han. I couldn't. But he stepped closer anyway. "Tasha." My name in his voice felt like an anchor thrown into chaos. Troubling, steady, too intimate. "Take your daughter," he said. "We're leaving." His tone left no room for argument. But I argued anyway. "You think you can just sweep us out of our life like you own us?" "No," he said immediately, "and that is exactly why you are leaving." Because whoever sent him, Han tilted his chin toward the bleeding man, does not see your life. They see leverage. The bat trembled in my hands. Leverage. They wanted to use us to control him. Fear flooded me thick, nauseating. It crawled up my throat until I could barely breathe. "Come," Han added, gentler but still unyielding. "Don't make this harder." I wanted to scream at him, punch him, break him the way my world was breaking. But then Zuri whispered, "Mama." "I'm scared." My chest cracked. I dropped the bat. I scooped her up and held her tight, pressing her heartbeat to mine. "Okay," I whispered. "We're going." Han nodded once, a silent, final decision, and signaled Min-ki. Everything happened too fast after that. Min-ki dragged the intruder down the hallway like dead weight. 2 more guards appeared out of nowhere, flanking me as if they'd always been stationed in my building. The stairwell smelled like mold and rust, a familiar scent. But tonight it felt like we were descending into some alternate version of my life. At the alley exit, a black SUV idled, engine humming impatiently. Han placed a hand on my back, not forceful, not gentle, guiding me forward. I flinched anyway. "Don't touch me," I murmured. His hand moved away instantly. I don't know why that surprised me. He opened the SUV door for me, an oddly formal gesture for a man who commanded killers. "Get in," he said. I sat down with Zuri curled against my side. Han slid in after us. Min-ki slammed the door and climbed into the front. The moment the vehicle pulled away, rain swallowed the city and again sheets of water blurring the windows, making West Harbor vanish behind a watery veil. I watched my apartment shrink into darkness. My cheap couch, my crooked bookshelf, Zuri's drawings taped to the wall, all of it gone, stolen by fear. Zuri tucked her head under my arm and whispered, "Are we going to die, No?" I said firmly, but my voice broke on the last syllable. Han turned his head slowly, studying us. "You will not die," he said. It wasn't reassurance. It wasn't kindness. It was a promise, delivered with the weight of someone who didn't break promises. Minutes later, the SUV turned onto a secluded road lined with heavy oak trees. The branches bent overhead like arches leading into some dark cathedral. At the end stood a brownstone mansion, elegant, silent, almost regal, and wrong. Too quiet, too perfect, too far from anything real. A guard opened the main door, and they ushered us inside. This wasn't a house. This was a golden cage. Soft lighting spilled across polished wood floors. Thick rugs muffled every step. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something expensive I couldn't name. Zuri whispered, "Wow." I didn't echo her. My eyes were drawn instead to the corners of the ceiling. Tiny black circles, barely noticeable unless you knew to look. Cameras, watching everything. I swallowed hard. Han noticed my gaze. Of course he did. "This is for your safety," he said. "It feels like a prison. It's temporary. Temporary could mean a day, a week, a lifetime." A female guard guided Zuri to a small bedroom with soft blankets and warm light. Zuri clung to me, but eventually let herself be led away. Exhausted. When the door closed, I turned back to Han. "You can't expect me to just stay here?" "No," he said. "I expect you to stay alive." He moved closer, not threateningly, but with purpose. "You were in the blast radius tonight because of me," he said. "And now someone has sent a man into your home." His voice dipped. "Quieter. And because you shouted, they will not stop." My throat constricted. Tears threatened. But I refused to let them fall. "So what am I now?" I whispered. "Your responsibility." Han didn't answer at first. He stepped closer, close enough that the stormlight from the window carved silver lines across his face, highlighting the sharp angles, the shadows under his eyes. "You are alive," he said finally, "and that makes you mine to protect." The words shouldn't have made my heart skitter, but they did. Despite the fear, despite the rage, despite the impossibility of his world and mine ever intersecting without blood. He looked down at me, really looked, and for the first time, something softened behind the iron in his eyes. Not weakness, not warmth, recognition. A pull neither of us had chosen, but both of us felt. He turned away abruptly, breaking the tension. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow, we figure out who wants you dead." The door closed behind him with a quiet click, leaving me alone in the golden cage with shadows on the walls and cameras blinking in the dark like watchful eyes. I held myself together until I couldn't anymore. Then I sat on the edge of the immaculate bed in the safest house I'd ever seen and cried quietly into my hands, because tonight, the world had changed, and tomorrow, I didn't know who I would be. I didn't sleep. Not because the room was too perfect, or because the sheets smelled like lavender instead of detergent, or because the silent cameras blinked from the corners like metallic eyelids. I didn't sleep because fear doesn't let you. Fear loops. It replays. It whispers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the masked man bursting from my apartment door. I smelled the blood on his breath. I felt Zuri clinging to me like she was drowning. So I wandered, barefoot, quiet, trying not to let the cameras see how badly my hands were shaking. The safe house was a labyrinth of soft carpets and quiet hallways that swallowed sound. That's when I heard them. 2 voices near the kitchen. Men guards talking low, careless, confident. Bomb wasn't even for the chairman. "Didn't you hear Min-ki? They wanted her?" A pause, a scoff. She embarrassed them, made them miss. Now she's the message. If they break her, he bleeds. My lungs froze. My entire body went numb. Not Han. Not the feared Mafia king. Me. My heart stopped, then restarted with a violent crush of betrayal. Heat surged behind my eyes. I walked away before they could see me, not fast, not slow, just steady enough to hold myself together. But something snapped inside me, quietly, cleanly, irreversibly. I climbed the stairs, gripping the rail so hard my palm burned. I didn't think, didn't breathe. I reached the third floor, and Han's office door loomed ahead, dark and heavy, like the entrance to a confession I hadn't agreed to give. I didn't knock. I pounded, hard, unrestrained, demanding, "Open the damn door!" The lock clicked. The door swung open. Han stood inside, sleeves rolled, hair damp from a recent shower. He looked at me with sharp, startled eyes. Not the piercing predator stare he'd used in the interrogation room, but something that flickered. Human. "Is Zuri?" "She's fine," I snapped. "Unlike me." The muscles in his jaw tightened. "What happened?" "You know exactly what happened," I said, stepping inside. "You just didn't think I'd find out." He straightened slowly. Guarded, composed. "What did you hear?" "Your men." I spat. "One of them said the bomb wasn't meant for you. That they wanted me." Han's eyes darkened, not with surprise, with confirmation. "You made me bait," I whispered, my voice cracking. "You dragged my little girl into your war." "That is not what happened. You let them put a target on my back." His nostrils flared. He stepped closer. But I lifted a hand, stopping him. "No, you don't get to play protector now. Not after lying to me in that car. Not after acting like this was about keeping me alive." He inhaled sharply. A calm man losing calm. "If they want me," I said, tears burning hot tracks down my face. "Then you knew before I did. You knew the moment that bomb blew. And you still brought us here like pieces on your goddamn board. Tasha?" My name in his voice low. Warning only enraged me more. "You should have told me." Something cracked. Inside him? He turned away abruptly, violently, and slammed his hand into the wall beside his desk. The impact echoed like a gunshot. A framed map fell to the floor, shattering glass across the hardwood. The sudden violence made my breath catch. But he didn't turn back. He braced his hands on the edge of the desk, shoulders rigid, chest rising with slow, deliberate breaths. Not anger, not toward me. Something older, darker, buried. "What aren't you telling me?" I whispered. Han's fingers curled against the desk so hard his knuckles turned bone white. When he finally turned around, something raw flickered behind his composure, a fracture in armor I thought was unbreakable. 12 years ago, he said quietly, my family made a decision. A wrong one that cost my sister her life. I froze. He never talked about himself, not to anyone, not ever. "She was 10, he continued. Smart, loud. She wanted to be a singer. She sat in the back seat of my father's car, and his voice caught for the first time since I'd met him. I should have been with her." The admission hung in the air like smoke. "I watched the bomb detonate," he said, eyes distant. "I saw the fire swallow the car. I saw her hand press to the window for a second before." He exhaled sharply, cutting the memory off before it gutted him. My anger wavered, just a little. He rubbed his wrist right where that long, pale scar cut across his forearm like a ghost pain returning. "I was too slow," he said. "Too blind. I made the wrong call." His eyes lifted to mine, cold, stormy, unguarded for the first time. "And I will not make that mistake again." I shook my head, tears still coming. "So your solution was to turn me into a protected prisoner?" "No," he said. "My solution was to keep you alive. Because the only thing they want more than killing me is proving I can't protect the one person who defied them." "Why me?" I whispered. "Why not one of your men? Why some random civilian you barely know?" His reply was immediate. "Because you ran into fire." His voice was low, almost reverent. "Because you shouted when everyone else would have stayed silent. Because you didn't freeze. Because you picked your child up before taking a breath for yourself." Then, softer, Because you remind them and me that I'm not untouchable. I hadn't expected that answer. Not the truth of it, not the weight of it. I sank onto the edge of a leather chair, gripping the armrest. You think I'm some symbol, I whispered. I'm not. I'm just a mom trying to keep her daughter alive. And that, he said, stepping closer, makes you more dangerous to them than any man I command. My breath stilled. I thought, he added, quieter now. If I controlled the environment, I could protect you both. But I underestimated the fact that you don't belong in a cage, golden or not. His eyes met mine. Tell me what you want. Tasha, tell me what you need. I stood, wiped my tears, lifted my chin. Give me a choice. Han blinked. He hadn't expected that. I can't protect my daughter hiding behind your men, I said. I can't sleep in a room with cameras in the corners and pretend this is safety. I can't keep letting you make decisions for us. Tasha. No, I said firmly. You want me alive? Then let me fight to stay alive. A long silence. His eyes moved from my face to the broken glass on the floor, then back to me as if calculating the risk of letting a civilian into a world built on violence. You want to be part of the plan? He asked slowly. Yes. Not a pawn, he clarified. A partner. A beat. Two. His breath left him in a sound that was almost a laugh of disbelief. You are the most impossible woman I have met, he murmured. Take it or leave it, I said. He looked at me, then really looked, and the tension between us coiled tight, heavy, electric. I'll take it, he said finally. But if you're in this with me, you follow every command I give. I didn't hesitate. And you, I countered. Tell me every threat before it reaches my doorstep. The corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile. Something more like surrender. Deal, he said. I exhaled, tension unraveling from my body. But Han, I added quietly, if I'm the target now, what's next? His eyes darkened. Next, he said softly, we find out who wants you dead. And then his gaze flicked to my lips before he forced it away. And then, he whispered, we end them. Pier 12 smelled like diesel, rust, and old secrets. Containers stacked 3 stories high loomed over the dark water, their metal skins scarred by decades of smuggling routes and silent deals. Fog crept across the docks like cautious fingers. At this hour, only the criminals and the desperate walked here willingly. Han led the group, long coat shifting with every step, posture sharp as a blade. His men flanked him in a tight formation. Beside him, trying to hide her shiver beneath borrowed layers, walked Tasha. He shouldn't have brought her. He knew that. But Ryu Banchong, one of the few Korean bosses whose word meant anything, demanded proof the attack hadn't been orchestrated by Han's side. Proof had a name, and a pair of eyes that saw what no one else had. Tasha Brown. She kept pace with him, jaw set, fear buried under stubbornness. Her breath fogged the air, and her hand occasionally brushed the side of her jacket, right where Han had slipped a small panic transmitter. For the first time in years, he hoped she'd never have to use it. Lights flickered overhead as they crossed into the meeting zone, a rectangular clearing between containers. Ryu and his entourage waited under the shadows of a crane, flanked by 2 black SUVs. Ryu himself stepped forward older, silver hair slicked back, a cane carved with dragons resting casually in his grip. Han Jae-min. Ryu greeted, expression unreadable. You brought the woman? Han inclined his head a fraction. You said her testimony was necessary. Ryu's gaze drifted to Tasha with interest too cold for comfort. And you trust her to speak? Han didn't hesitate. I trust my assessment. Tasha swallowed. She didn't look away from Ryu. She didn't hide. That impressed Ryu, and it irritated him. Han saw the flicker in the man's eyes. Then let us hear. The crack of a rifle split the air. Han reacted before thought. He seized Tasha's arm and yanked her to the ground as splintered wood from a nearby crate burst into the air where her head had been a second earlier. Sniper Minky roared. Chaos detonated instantly. Bullets rained from above, not random, but precise, professional, methodical. A second shot slammed into the steel beside Han. A third sliced the air so close to Tasha's cheek it opened a thin red line along her skin. She gasped, hand flying to her face. Ryu's guards scattered, firing blindly toward the rooftops. One fell before he could take cover, collapsing with a hole clean through his chest. "Move!" Han barked. He grabbed Tasha by the waist and hauled her behind a row of containers. Bullets peppered the steel as they ran, each metallic clang, a reminder death was inches away. "Stay low," Han ordered. "I am," she snapped back, breath ragged, eyes wide. Sparks showered them as another bullet ricocheted off the container's edge. Han shoved her down, shielding her with his body as they sprinted through a corridor formed by cargo crates. A shot whistled past Han's ear close enough that it burned. Behind them, Minky yelled. Two shooters north and west cranes, Han mentally mapped the angles. Whoever planned this knew Pier 12's architecture. They'd chosen kill zones that boxed Han in. A trap, not for Ryu, for him. A bullet slammed into a steel drum beside them, cracking its surface. The second shot hit home, punching through Han's coat, slicing into his shoulder with a white-hot burst of pain. He staggered, but kept moving. Tasha cried, "You're bleeding." "Later," he hissed through clenched teeth. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her forward as another volley of shots shredded the crates behind them. His arm throbbed with every heartbeat, hot blood soaking into his sleeve, but he didn't slow down. They reached the end of the container corridor, only to find the path open and exposed. And at the far end waited a silhouette. A man, face half covered by a tactical mask, gun raised. A bead of red light trained directly on Tasha's heart. Time fractured. Han didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't weigh consequences. He moved. He slammed into Tasha, shoving her sideways just as the muzzle flashed. The bullet meant for her tore past Han's ribs, grazing deep enough to rip flesh. Pain detonated up his side sharp. Electric, but he didn't let himself fall. Instead, he grabbed her waist and propelled them both toward the only direction that wasn't instant death. The edge of the pier. "Tasha," he shouted. When I say jump, she didn't hear the last word. Because the gunman fired again. Han didn't hesitate. He wrapped an arm around her torso, anchoring her to him. Now. They leapt, the world inverted sky, fog, lights a swirl of motion before the ocean swallowed them whole. The water was brutal, icy, black, unforgiving. It collapsed around Han with enough force to steal his breath. His wounds screamed, blood diluting into cold salt. He pulled Tasha upward, kicking hard, ignoring the agony tearing across his shoulder. They surfaced beneath a tangle of wooden beams supporting the pier. Shadows hid them. Darkness protected them. For the moment, Han clung to a slippery crossbeam with one arm, the other wrapped around Tasha's waist to keep her above water. She was shaking violently from cold. Terror. Or both. "Han," she stuttered. "You're hurt. You're bleeding too," he said, nodding toward her cheek. That's her teeth chattered just a scratch. He almost smiled. Almost. Her hand drifted toward his shoulder, and when her fingertips touched the wound, a sharp breath tore from his throat. She jerked her hand back. "Sorry," she whispered. "It's fine," he lied. Blood seeped warm against the frigid water. She moved closer, steadying him with both hands now. Her breath brushed his jaw, rapid and uneven. "Why did you jump with me?" she whispered, voice cracking. He looked at her, really looked water dripping down her lashes. Fear and fire tangled in her gaze. "Because they were aiming for you," he murmured. "That doesn't answer my question." He exhaled, breath mixing with the cold night air. "Because," he said slowly, I would rather take a bullet than watch you die. Her lips parted. Shock. Disbelief. Something softer beneath it, something dangerous. The water rocked them gently, but everything else was still. So that's what this is, she whispered. Protection. He met her gaze, raw and unguarded. It's more than that. A beat of silence. Her hands slid up his chest, hesitant, trembling until they reached his face. She cupped his jaw gently, her thumb brushing the edge of his soaked hair. The gesture stole his breath in a way no bullet ever could. Tasha, he warned, voice low, cracking. You saved me twice, she whispered. Tonight makes 3. He swallowed hard. That doesn't mean it means something, she said softly. For both of us. The pier above creaked. Far off shouting echoed Han's men searching. Enemies regrouping, but down here, beneath the world, danger was just a heartbeat and a breath away. Her breath ghosted against his lips. Tell me not to, she whispered. Han's pulse thundered. Her lips brushed his, and he couldn't tell her no. The kiss happened like the fall instinct, desperation, gravity pulling them together harder than either of them could resist. Wet, shivering, breathless, alive. Her hands pulled him closer, and for one suspended moment, nothing existed except the heat of her mouth and the cold water around them, the softness of her lips against his, the tremor in her breath, the way she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. When they finally broke apart, foreheads touching, air trembling between them, she whispered, We're not getting out of this clean. Are we? Han let his forehead rest against hers, closing his eyes for a brief, dangerous second. No, he murmured, but we're getting out. Together. Above them, footsteps thundered. The hunt had begun again, but for the first time since the explosion. Han felt something sharpen beneath the pain. Purpose. And in the dark water under Pier 12, holding the woman he shouldn't want but couldn't lose, he realized he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for her. The safe house hummed with the low thrum of medical supplies, radio chatter, and tension stretched too thin. Han sat at the head of the war room table, his injured shoulder bandaged tight, his shirt clinging wetly to him where the blood hadn't fully dried. But he didn't feel the wound. Not really. He felt the betrayal. The ambush at Pier 12 had been too coordinated, too precise, too expensive. Snipers, close-range shooters, transport blockades no street-level crew could pull off that type of multi-angle kill box. This was someone with reach, someone who understood both Korean Mafia structures and port hierarchies, someone who wanted Han and Ryu to obliterate each other so the port routes remained wide open for the taking, someone who benefited from chaos. Min-ki entered the room abruptly, jaw clenched. We got the shooter, he said. The one from the crate tower. He's alive, barely. The bastard wouldn't talk until we arranged a persuasive environment. Han didn't want details. He only cared about results. What did he say, Han asked. Min-ki slid a tablet across the table. A photo was pulled up grainy, time-stamped, clearly ripped from a hidden camera. Zuri, standing outside Westfield Elementary, her red backpack on, her braids slightly crooked. Han's breath froze. Beside the photo, a line of text, bring the woman, or the child disappears. Tasha's fear at the safe house, her trembling voice, her cut cheek, her fierce protectiveness, all of it stabbed deeper into him now. But Min-ki's voice dragged him back. He said the job wasn't Korean, not Ryu. Ryu was supposed to take the fall. The real order came from someone else. Han didn't blink. Who? The name came like a loaded round. Vincent Leone. Silence swallowed the room. Min-ki continued cautiously. He's been trying to expand into the port routes. Koreans hold most of the northern docks. You hold the customs inspectors. Ryu has the union. Leone wanted you two to kill each other or be arrested in the crossfire. Han stared at the photo of Zuri again, the smallest person in this entire war. He spoke quietly. Where did Leone get this picture? Minky hesitated, then swiped to the next image. Leone himself, leaning back in a velvet chair, cigar smoke curling around him as he showed the photo to someone off camera. His expression relaxed, confident, like a man who believed himself untouchable. Got her? The little brat's face is all over the footage, Leone said in the recording, his accent thick. Tell Han if he doesn't bleed tonight, the kid bleeds tomorrow. Han didn't move, didn't breathe. Inside, a cold storm built. He shut off the audio. Ryu entered then, leaning on his cane, his expression carved from stone. So it wasn't me, he said simply. It was never you, Han replied. Ryu smirked. Leone has always been a vulture circling the docks, too eager, too arrogant, and too stupid to think a child is off limits. Han's jaw tightened. There is a price for men like him, Death Ryu guessed. Han shook his head. No. Ryu arched a brow. Prison. Minky blinked in shock. Ryu chuckled under his breath. You're truly letting the woman influence you, Ryu said. Han didn't deny it, because Tasha had carved her voice into his bones that night under Pier 12. The way she whispered, he didn't have to be a monster to win. And he wanted, for reasons he couldn't name, to be the kind of man she could look at without fear. No blood, Han repeated quietly. He nodded to Minky. Prepare everything. Financials, offshore accounts, shell companies, all of Leone's laundering routes. Minky's eyes widened. He understood now. Han wasn't simply turning Leone in. He was going to destroy the man's empire in front of the world. Ryu tilted his head. Law enforcement will not touch a Mafia boss without proof. Han tapped the tablet. Then we give them proof. Hours later, the takedown. Leone's mansion sat on a hill, all marble fountains and gold railings, a grotesque display of wealth dripping with arrogance. Inside, Leone stood in front of a mirror adjusting his tie, unaware of the grid tightening around him. In a black van parked a block away, Han sat beside Ryu and a federal liaison who looked pale as death. I've sent the files, Han said calmly. The liaison's phone buzzed. A dozen federal agents whispered for confirmation. Mr. Han, the agent stammered. With what you just gave us, this is enough for 40 indictments. And a life sentence for Leone, Han said. Make sure his family is protected. They were never involved. The agent stared at him, bewildered. Why do you care? Han didn't answer. Instead, he gestured forward. Move! The FBI poured into the mansion like a tidal wave. Doors shattered. Men screamed. Lights blazed. Vincent Leone stumbled out of his bedroom, shirt half-buttoned, face contorted in shock as agents seized him, reading out charges like a grocery list of his empire's sins: laundering, racketeering, attempted murder, conspiracy to incite gang warfare, enforcement threats involving a minor. Han listened to the chaos calmly through the radio feed. But then Leone spotted one of the cameras held by a federal tech. He lunged toward it red-faced, wild, spitting rage. You think this is justice? He screamed. You think this is my end? Agents shoved him down, but he kept shouting. Han Jae-min has changed. He's weak now. Soft because of that black woman. His voice cracked into a furious snarl. He sold out because of her. Han closed his eyes for a moment. Ryu swore under his breath. Minky muttered, They'll twist this into something ugly. Han didn't respond. He let the silence settle inside him like snow over grave soil. Leone's racist venom didn't surprise him. American ports were built on racial hierarchies and unspoken wars. But hearing it spoken aloud, with such hatred, confirmed one thing. Leone feared Tasha. Feared the influence she had on Han. Feared the possibility that Han might choose a different kind of power. A power not built on blood. Back at the safe house, Zuri sat cross-legged on the living room rug. Crayons scattered around her as she drew something bright in chaotic swirls of color. A girl with curls, a tall man with dark hair, and a huge dog that did not exist, but she clearly wished did. 2 elite Korean bodyguards sat nearby. Father and daughter pair Junho and Aaron, former intelligence officers, who could dismantle a grown man in 3 seconds. Zuri fed them crackers as if they were house pets. They accepted each one solemnly. "Is Mommy coming back soon?" Zuri asked quietly. "She will," Aaron replied, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. "Your mother is very brave." Zuri nodded, then added thoughtfully, "She says Mr. Han is brave too." Junho's lips quirked. "He is something, that's for sure." Before Zuri could ask what that meant, the door opened. Han stepped inside, his coat still damp from the night air. His eyes found Zuri first. She looked up at him, a small, resilient child with a heart too big for the world she'd been dragged into. And under her gaze, something in him softened. Barely, but undeniably. "Is Mommy okay?" Zuri asked. Han nodded. "Yes." "Is the bad guy gone?" "Yes," he said, after a moment. Zuri smiled with pure relief. Han didn't deserve that smile, but he accepted it anyway. Later, Tasha returns. The safe house door clicked open. Tasha stepped inside, hair damp, cheeks flushed from cold wind, eyes sharp with the aftershocks of fear and fury. Han rose instinctively. Their eyes met. There was no need for words. She knew the truth. He knew she knew. "Vincent?" she asked quietly. "Arrested," Han answered. "No blood, no blood," he confirmed. Something flickered in her gaze, relief, and something warmer, something he didn't have a name for yet. She approached slowly, studying him. "You kept your word," she whispered. "I did," Han murmured. "And you protected Zuri?" "Yes." She exhaled, long and shaky. Then, unexpectedly, she reached up and touched his bandaged shoulder gently this time. He inhaled sharply. "You're still bleeding," she said softly. "And you're still shaking," he replied. She didn't deny it, but she didn't step back either. "Han," she said, voice trembling with something deeper than fear. "You're changing. Because of you." Her breath caught. "That scares me." "It scares me too," he admitted. A pause. A long one. Fragile. Loaded. "But maybe," she whispered, "we don't have to be scared alone." Han stared at her, this woman who ran into fire, who confronted him like an equal, who forced him to face everything he'd buried. He wanted to reach for her. He didn't. Not yet. Instead, he said, "We're not done. Leon was only the beginning." "I know," she replied. "Then stay," he murmured. Not a command, not a threat, a request. Tasha looked at him, really looked, then nodded once. "I'm here," she said softly. For now, it wasn't a promise, but it was enough. For the first time in years, Han felt the ground shift beneath him, not because he was losing control, but because he was choosing something else, something terrifying, something powerful, something that felt dangerously like hope. The sky above West Harbor softened into pale gold, the kind of dawn that touched everything gently, as if afraid to break the quiet that followed a night of violence. From the balcony of the safe house, Han watched the horizon with a stillness no one else could maintain. His shoulder hurt, his ribs throbbed, and exhaustion pulled at him like an undertow. But none of it reached his expression. He had stood through worse nights, but never one that ended like this. Behind him, the house murmured softly Zuri's light footsteps, the quiet rustling of blankets, Aaron humming while preparing tea. Life fragile, surprising survived inside these walls. Tasha, too. He sensed her before she walked out, her presence subtle yet grounding. When she stepped onto the balcony, the dawn painted her in soft amber, turning her curls into a warm halo. He turned toward her slowly, almost cautiously. "You're awake early," he said. "I couldn't sleep," she answered, pulling her sweater closer. My mind kept replaying everything. He nodded once. He understood. Silence stretched between them, not sharp, but full. Something waiting. Something healing. Tasha approached the railing, leaning her forearms against the cool metal. "Zuri's still sleeping," she murmured. "That's the first time she hasn't had nightmares since this started." Han lowered his eyes. "I'm glad." "You did that," Tasha said quietly. He almost disagreed, but the truth was there. Zuri trusted him now. Enough to sleep without fear. Still, Han felt a sting he couldn't hide. Because it shouldn't have been him. It should have been her father, her mother. A normal life. Not a man built from violence and scars. "Last night," Tasha said softly, "I realized something." Han braced for it: rejection, departure, boundaries carved from fear. But she wasn't running. She placed both hands flat on the railing, steadying herself. Fear doesn't choose who it haunts. But courage, that's a choice. Han turned fully toward her. "And you think I'm courageous?" he asked. Voice quiet. "I think," she said, meeting his eyes, "that for the first time in your life, you're choosing more than survival." Her voice trembled with honesty. "You're choosing to protect without blood, to trust without demanding loyalty, to let someone see who you really are." He swallowed hard because no one had ever voiced those choices before. No one had dared to see him without armor. Tasha stepped closer. Not tentative, not afraid. "I'm choosing something too," she said. Han's pulse shifted. "And what is that?" His voice had dropped. Deeper, more vulnerable. She held his gaze. "I'm choosing a future that doesn't run from what this is." For a breathless moment, Han didn't move. Couldn't move. Tasha exhaled softly. "I know your world. I know the danger. But I also know the man who threw himself in front of bullets. The man who jumped into freezing water to save me. The man who gave a little girl a night of safety after chaos." Han lowered his eyes, because emotion threatened to break through his controlled exterior. "I'm not a good man." "Tasha?" "No," she said. "You're a man learning to be better." Her hand lifted. It hovered for a second, asking, not assuming, before settling softly against his cheek. The touch stole his breath. He raised his own hand, cupping her, pressing it closer, as if anchoring himself to something solid and real. "Tasha," he murmured, voice bruised with sincerity. "I've spent years making sure no one could get close enough to hurt me. And I'm not here to hurt you," she whispered. "I'm here to stand with you." His jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're promising." "Yes, I do." The sky brightened behind them, an unintentional blessing. Tasha's voice softened but grew steadier. "You're not alone in this anymore, and you don't have to carry everything on your back. Not your empire, not your grief, not your scars." Her thumb brushed the edge of his jaw, slow and deliberate. "Let me be part of your future," she said. "Not your hostage, not your liability, your partner." Han closed his eyes as if the word itself carried too much weight. When he opened them again, something had shifted. Surrender, acceptance, hope cracking through walls built from violence. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you stay by choice. I know. And it's dangerous. I know. And I am not always gentle." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll teach you." He huffed a quiet laugh, one that startled even himself. Then the balcony door slid open behind them. Zuri, wrapped in a large blanket, dragging behind her like a cape, hair sticking out in wild spirals, blinking up at them sleepily. "Mama," she whispered. "Mr. Han turned, instantly softer. Something even he didn't realize he showed. "Yes, little one," Tasha said, kneeling beside her. Zuri went straight to Han instead. "Are we safe now?" Han didn't kneel often, but he knelt for her, He lowered himself until his eyes were level with hers. Yes. And are you staying? She asked, looking between the two adults with surprising clarity. Tasha felt her breath lodge in her throat. Han's answer came before she could speak. That depends, he said gently, on whether you and your mother want me here. Zuri nodded solemnly, as if delivering a decree. I want you to stay. You saved us, and Mama likes you. Tasha's cheeks flushed with warmth she couldn't hide. Zuri Han looked at Tasha then, really looked, searching for permission, not assuming it. Tasha met his gaze, and this time, she didn't hold back. She leaned in, pressed her forehead to his. Her hand slid to the back of his neck, fingers threading into damp hair. I want you to stay, she whispered. It was not a declaration, not a plea, not a promise. It was an invitation. Han exhaled, long and uneven, as if releasing years of tension he'd carried alone. He wrapped an arm gently around her waist, pulling her closer, grounding himself in her presence, her heat, her certainty. And for the first time since childhood, Han allowed himself to want a life that wasn't built on the ashes of another. Zuri giggled softly. Are you gonna kiss now? Tasha laughed, embarrassed. Han's lips curved into the faintest smile. He brushed a thumb along Tasha's cheek, a whisper of a touch, then kissed her. Slow this time, warm, certain, not born from danger or desperation, a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, Tasha rested her head against his shoulder. What now? She murmured. Han looked out at the rising sun, the harbor returning to life, the world that had tried to kill them both. Now, he said quietly, we build something new. Tasha smiled. Together, he nodded once. Firm. Together. Zuri climbed into both their arms then, a small bundle of warmth and hope wedged between their chests. The three of them stood on the balcony while dawn spilled over the city, washing away the night's blood, washing away old ghosts. Tomorrow would bring challenges, threats, consequences. But today, for the first time, Han didn't face them alone. He had a woman who challenged him to be better, a child who trusted him without hesitation, a life he never thought he could have. And as the sun fully broke over West Harbor, casting gold across the water, Han knew this was not a fragile peace. It was a future.